Have you ever wondered why someone you care about seems convinced that love is destined to fail before it even begins? This belief isn't just pessimism or past hurt talking. It's something deeper, more systematic, and surprisingly logical when you understand the mental framework behind it. The just world fallacy. Why avoidants believe love always fails reveals how our minds can trick us into seeing patterns that aren't really there, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. Picture this scenario. Someone watches relationship after relationship crumble around them. Their parents divorced when they were young. Their best friend's marriage ended in bitter arguments. Every romantic comedy they see ends happily, but real life keeps serving up disappointment. Slowly, a belief forms. The world is fair, people get what they deserve, and love simply doesn't work out for people like them. This isn't random thinking. This is the just world fallacy at work, combined with something psychologists call avoidant attachment. The just world fallacy makes us believe that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. It's our brain's way of making sense of chaos, of finding order in a random universe. When someone with avoidant attachment applies this thinking to love, they create an ironclad case for why relationships are doomed. They've seen the evidence, they've lived through the pain, and their logical mind tells them that the pattern will continue forever. But here's what makes this particularly fascinating and tragic at the same time. The just world fallacy doesn't work alone. It teams up with other cognitive biases like confirmation bias, where we only notice information that supports what we already believe. It partners with negativity bias, where bad experiences weigh more heavily in our memory than good ones. Together, these mental shortcuts create a perfect storm of romantic pessimism. What makes this even more complex is how avoidant attachment developed in the first place. Usually, it started early, when a child learned that depending on others led to disappointment or rejection. The young mind, trying to protect itself, created a simple rule: independence equals safety, closeness equals pain. Fast forward to adulthood, and that same protective mechanism now interprets every relationship struggle as proof that the rule was correct all along. Understanding this pattern matters because it affects millions of people who genuinely want love but find themselves sabotaging it at every turn. They're not being difficult or stubborn, they're operating from a worldview that feels completely rational and protective. The challenge isn't changing their mind through arguments or evidence. The challenge is understanding how their mind works and why their logic makes perfect sense within their framework. If you want to better understand someone's attachment style, see the link in the description to one of the most popular books on attachment theory. Now let's explore how this plays out in real life through the story of someone we'll call Marcus, though you might recognize similar patterns in characters like Chuck Bass from Gossip Girl or Joe Goldberg from You on Netflix. Marcus had been single for 3 years by choice, not circumstance. At 32, he was successful, attractive, and had no shortage of people interested in dating him. But Marcus had reached what he considered an intelligent conclusion. Romantic love was a beautiful lie that society sold to keep people hopeful and spending money on wedding industries. His evidence was overwhelming, or so it seemed. His parents had divorced when he was 14, after years of increasingly bitter arguments that ended with his father moving across the country and barely keeping in touch. His older sister had been through 2 divorces by age 30. His college girlfriend had cheated on him with his roommate. His last serious relationship had ended when his partner accused him of being emotionally unavailable, which struck him as particularly unfair since he had been trying to protect both of them from inevitable disappointment. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Marcus met someone at a work conference who challenged everything he thought he knew about his own logical thinking. Sarah was a therapist who specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy, and during a casual conversation over coffee, She did something that no one had ever done before. Instead of arguing with Marcus's conclusions about love, she became curious about his reasoning process. The conversation started innocently enough. Marcus had made a comment about how divorce rates proved that marriage was essentially a failed institution. Sarah nodded thoughtfully and asked, "That's interesting. How do you account for the couples who do stay together? What's different about them in your analysis?" Marcus found himself stumbling slightly. He had always focused on the failures, not the successes, but he quickly recovered, explaining that the couples who stayed together were probably just settling, afraid to be alone, or trapped by financial circumstances. Sarah smiled and asked another question that stopped Marcus cold. If someone applied that same analytical framework to friendship, would they conclude that friendship was also doomed to fail? After all, most childhood friendships don't last into adulthood. Many adult friendships end due to moves, career changes, or growing apart. Marcus realized he had never applied his relationship logic to friendships, and somehow he maintained several close friendships that he valued deeply. What happened next would change how Marcus saw not just relationships, but his own thinking patterns. Sarah introduced him to the concept of cognitive biases, not to prove him wrong, but to help him understand why his brain had developed such a specific and narrow focus when it came to romantic love. The just world fallacy had convinced Marcus that his relationship failures were somehow deserved or inevitable based on the kind of person he was. Since his early experiences taught him that depending on others led to pain, and since the just world fallacy suggested that this pain was somehow fair or predictable, Marcus had concluded that people like him were simply not meant for lasting love. The cognitive bias, called confirmation bias, then ensured that Marcus paid attention to every divorce announcement, every breakup story, every romantic disappointment around him, while barely noticing the quiet, steady relationships that worked. But Sarah's questions revealed something even more interesting about Marcus's thinking. He was incredibly skilled at analyzing business risks and making strategic decisions in his professional life. He could weigh probabilities, account for multiple variables, and make complex decisions under uncertainty. Yet when it came to love, his analytical skills seemed to shut down entirely, replaced by a simple binary conclusion: love fails, therefore avoid love. The breakthrough moment came when Sarah asked Marcus to imagine he was advising his best friend, someone exactly like him, who had experienced exactly the same relationship history. Would Marcus tell his friend to give up on love entirely, or would he help his friend think through what could be learned from past experiences to make better choices in the future? Marcus realized that he would never give a friend such absolute, hopeless advice. The compassion and wisdom he would offer to someone else had somehow never been applied to his own situation. This wasn't just an intellectual exercise. Marcus was discovering how the just world fallacy had created a story about himself that felt true, but wasn't actually helpful or accurate. The fallacy suggested that his relationship struggles were somehow deserved or inevitable based on the kind of person he was. But what if his struggles were simply the result of specific, learnable patterns that could be changed with awareness and practice? What makes this story particularly powerful is how it illustrates the difference between being logical and being wise. Marcus thought he was being logical by concluding that love always fails. But true logic would have required him to examine all the evidence, not just the evidence that supported his existing beliefs. True logic would have asked why his analytical skills worked perfectly in every other area of his life, but seemed to malfunction completely when it came to romantic relationships. The resolution of Marcus's story came not through a dramatic romantic gesture or a sudden personality change, but through a gradual shift in how he understood his own thinking patterns. He began to see that his avoidant attachment wasn't a fixed personality trait, but a protective strategy that had outlived its usefulness. The just world fallacy wasn't revealing eternal truths about love, but was simply his brain's attempt to make sense of painful experiences using incomplete information. Now that we understand how these mental patterns develop and persist, let's talk about what can actually be done about them. The advice that follows isn't theoretical, it's practical, tested and designed for real people dealing with real challenges in their real relationships. First, you need to understand that challenging the just world fallacy doesn't mean pretending that bad things don't happen or that all relationships work out perfectly. That would be naive and ultimately unhelpful. Instead, it means developing a more nuanced understanding of how the world actually works. Bad things happen to good people, and good things happen regardless of whether someone deserves them. Relationships fail for specific reasons that can be identified and addressed, not because love itself is flawed. Start by examining your evidence collection process. If you believe that love always fails, make an honest list of all the relationships you know personally. Include your parents, your friends, your co-workers, your extended family. Don't just count the divorces and breakups. Count the relationships that work, even if they're not perfect. Count the couples who work through problems instead of giving up. Count the people who learned from past relationship mistakes and built something better the next time. This isn't about forced positivity or pretending that relationship challenges don't exist. This is about getting an accurate picture of reality instead of a selective one. The confirmation bias that often accompanies avoidant attachment makes us notice relationship failures while barely registering relationship successes. Consciously broadening your evidence base helps counteract this mental shortcut. Next, you need to understand the difference between patterns and inevitabilities. Yes, many relationships end in breakups. Yes, divorce rates are significant in many countries. These are patterns worth understanding and learning from, but patterns are not the same as inevitabilities. Understanding why many relationships struggle can help you make better choices, develop better skills, and create better outcomes. Treating relationship challenges as inevitable, however, removes all possibility for growth, learning, and improvement. Think about this like learning to drive a car. Many new drivers get into accidents during their first few years behind the wheel. This is a pattern. But the logical response isn't to conclude that driving is impossible or that some people are destined to crash forever. The logical response is to understand what causes most accidents and develop specific skills to avoid those situations. The same principle applies to relationships. Here's a specific exercise that can help rewire these thinking patterns. Every time you notice a thought like, relationships always end badly, or love never works out, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. First, is this thought about all relationships everywhere? Or is it about specific relationships with specific problems? Second, what would you tell a good friend who had this exact thought about their own love life? Third, if this thought is true, how do you explain the relationships around you that do work even if they're not perfect? This questioning process isn't designed to make you blindly optimistic about love. It's designed to help you think more clearly and accurately about relationships, which gives you much better information for making actual decisions about your own love life. Another crucial step involves understanding how avoidant attachment affects your behavior in relationships, not just your thoughts about them. The just world fallacy might convince you that relationships are doomed, but avoidant attachment often creates behaviors that actually make relationship problems more likely. This creates what psychologists call a self-fulfilling prophecy. For example, if you believe that getting too close to someone will inevitably lead to disappointment, you might unconsciously maintain emotional distance even when someone is trying to build intimacy with you. Your partner experiences this as rejection or disinterest, which creates the very relationship problems that confirm your original belief that love doesn't work. The problem isn't that love is impossible. The problem is that your protective strategies are creating the outcomes you're trying to avoid. Learning to recognize these self-protective behaviors is essential for breaking the cycle. Common patterns include avoiding difficult conversations about feelings or relationship needs, maintaining independence to the point where partnership becomes impossible, or ending relationships at the first sign of conflict rather than working through problems together. These behaviors make perfect sense if you believe that relationships are doomed anyway, but they become counterproductive if you actually want a relationship to succeed. The most effective approach involves developing what therapists call secure attachment behaviors, even if you don't feel emotionally secure yet. This means practicing vulnerability in small, manageable doses. It means learning to communicate about your needs and fears instead of just withdrawing when problems arise. It means staying present during relationship conflicts instead of immediately planning your exit strategy. This doesn't mean accepting poor treatment or staying in genuinely incompatible relationships. It means learning the difference between relationship problems that can be solved through communication and skill building, and relationship problems that indicate fundamental incompatibility. Most people with avoidant attachment err on the side of assuming all problems indicate incompatibility, which prevents them from developing the very skills that make relationships work. Here's something that might surprise you. Changing these patterns doesn't require you to become a completely different person or abandon your analytical nature. In fact, your analytical skills can become your greatest asset in building better relationships once you learn to apply them accurately. Instead of analyzing why relationships are doomed, you can analyze what specific skills successful couples use and practice, developing those skills yourself. For example, research shows that couples who stay together long-term have specific communication patterns during conflicts. They take breaks when discussions get too heated. They focus on solving specific problems rather than attacking each other's character. They express appreciation for each other regularly, not just during good times. These are learnable skills, not personality traits you're born with or without. Your analytical nature can help you identify which skills you need to develop and track your progress as you practice them. The final piece of practical advice involves reframing what it means to take risks in relationships. The just world fallacy often makes emotional vulnerability feel like a dangerous gamble with inevitable negative consequences. But every meaningful area of life involves uncertainty and risk. You take risks in your career, your friendships, your health choices, and your financial decisions. The question isn't whether relationships involve risk. The question is whether the potential benefits justify the risk, and whether you have the skills to manage that risk intelligently. This is where understanding attachment theory becomes particularly valuable. Avoidant attachment developed as a protective strategy during a time when emotional dependence was genuinely unsafe or unreliable. But adult relationships operate under completely different circumstances. You now have the power to choose partners, set boundaries, leave situations that don't work, and communicate your needs directly. The protection that avoidant attachment provided during childhood may no longer be necessary in your adult relationships. Learning to take calculated emotional risks doesn't mean throwing caution to the wind or ignoring red flags in relationships. It means developing the confidence that you can handle both relationship success and relationship failure, which paradoxically makes you much more likely to experience relationship success. Think about someone like Emily Cooper from Emily in Paris on Netflix. Her character often jumps into romantic situations with optimism and enthusiasm, but she also maintains her sense of self and her ability to make independent decisions. She doesn't avoid love because she's afraid it might not work out perfectly. She engages with love as one important part of a full, complex life that includes career goals, friendships, personal growth, and new experiences. The goal isn't to become naive or unrealistic about relationship challenges. The goal is to become wise and skilled in navigating those challenges. The just world fallacy tells you that your relationship struggles prove something fundamental about your worthiness for love. But attachment theory tells you that your relationship struggles reveal specific skills you can develop and specific patterns you can change. Understanding these concepts can transform not just your love life, but your entire approach to uncertainty and risk in every area of life. The same cognitive biases that make love feel impossible might be limiting your career growth, your friendships, or your willingness to try new experiences. Learning to think more clearly about one area often improves thinking in all areas. As we bring this exploration to a close, it's important to recognize that understanding the just world fallacy and avoidant attachment isn't just an intellectual exercise. This knowledge has the power to change lives, to open doors that seemed permanently closed, and to create possibilities that once felt impossible. The just world fallacy whispers that your past relationship struggles prove something fundamental about your future romantic possibilities. But psychology reveals a different truth. Your past experiences taught you specific strategies for protecting yourself that made perfect sense at the time, but may no longer serve your current goals and circumstances. The difference between these two interpretations isn't small. It's the difference between resignation and empowerment. Every person who has ever overcome avoidant attachment patterns has had to face this fundamental choice. They could continue believing that their protective strategies revealed eternal truths about the nature of love, or they could begin experimenting with new approaches based on their current circumstances rather than their past experiences. The people who choose growth over protection don't become different people. They become more complete versions of who they already are. Consider how this applies to your own life right now. Somewhere in your social circle, there are probably couples who make love look effortless and natural. If you've been operating from the just world fallacy, you might have concluded that those couples are somehow fundamentally different from you, that they possess some magical quality or advantage that makes love work for them, but not for you. But attachment theory suggests a different explanation. Those couples have simply developed skills and awareness that you haven't learned yet. This isn't about blame or judgment. No one chooses their attachment style during childhood. No one decides to develop cognitive biases. These patterns emerge from experiences that were often beyond your control. But as an adult, you do have the power to examine these patterns, understand how they developed, and decide whether they still serve your current goals and values. The path forward isn't about forcing yourself to become vulnerable or trusting before you feel ready. That approach often backfires and reinforces avoidant patterns. Instead, the path involves gradually expanding your comfort zone while developing the skills that make emotional risk feel more manageable. It involves learning to distinguish between reasonable caution and unnecessary self-protection. Think about learning any new skill that matters to you, whether it's advancing in your career, improving your health, or developing a creative talent. Growth requires you to risk temporary discomfort and potential failure in service of long-term improvement. Love works the same way. The discomfort of vulnerability and the risk of disappointment aren't flaws in the system, they're the.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to better understand avoidance, relationships, and psychological biases, then subscribe to our channel, because you deserve beautiful relationships.